Rob Orlando from Hybrid Athletics here, and this is something that I've been tinkering with for quite a while, is to try to figure out how to make small adjustments in the size and the weights of the Atlas stones, and we finally have got it figured out, and I'd like to share that formula with everybody, just so that if you've got a couple different stone molds and you're looking to make some smaller jumps up in weight, there's a way to do it. There's a way to do it safely and consistently so that you can really nail down the weights that you want. So for our purposes today, what I've put together is I've got a 14-inch stone mold, which when you pour Quikrete 5000 or something similar, just a traditional concrete that you can buy at any home improvement center, when you use that, it'll produce a stone that most of the time weighs about 115 pounds. And what I'm trying to do is to take out some of the weight in the center of the stone to make it 10 pounds lighter. So I'm trying to make a stone that fits in between the 95 and the 115 to make a stone that's right at 105. So we're still tinkering just a little bit with the styrofoam centers, because that's what we use to hollow out the middle of the stone. But it's proven to be really effective, especially when you're dropping it onto something very soft. That's always been the big problem, is that you've got a weak spot in the middle. But what we've figured out is that you need something very soft to drop it on, and then you need this to be dead center inside the stone. Those two things will produce a stone that is consistent and reliable. So here's what we're looking at. Here are the parts that you'll need in order to do this. I've got a styrofoam center. This was just purchased at a craft shop, so it's a very hard styrofoam. I've got an eye bolt purchased at Home Depot. This is a 10-inch eye bolt, and it's a ½ inch. Not knurled all the way down. It's knurled about halfway. I've got the nut that goes on the end so that this will thread together. And then I've got two sets of washers. I've got one that'll slide right over, but I actually want a bigger one to spread out the surface area, and you'll see why we use that. So I've got two sets of washers that I'll use. You'll also need a drill with a very small drill bit. So we're looking at, that's not even an 1/8 inch drill bit, so something very small. You'll need zip ties once it's all put together. You'll need silicone spray. You will need snips to trim the wire. And the last little bit is that you'll need some metal mirror hanger wire. This is also purchased right at Home Depot for a couple dollars. You don't need, they make it in a bunch of different weights. So you can, this is 30 pound. So you don't need anything crazy. You just need it to be able to support the stone, the styrofoam center, so that the styrofoam won't float up to the top, and you'll see why in a second. So let's go work through what this process looks like. So the first thing I'll do is separate the two halves. I'm going to put the top over here, and then now I'm left with the solid half of the mold. And the first thing I need to do is drill a hole through the mold itself. And what I'm going to do is drill the hole right at the very top of the H in the mold itself, and just drill straight through with my small drill bit. So right at the very top of the center of the H, so basically the very top of the mold itself. There you go. So now I've got a hole that goes right through the mold. And the next thing I'll do is take my wire and I'm going to feed it through. And you'll see what we're going to do here in a second. So I'll feed through. You don't need a ton. I've actually figured out that you don't really need much at all. It helps to have maybe a foot or so coming through. And you've got about a foot or so. And then what I'll do is snip the back end of this. So I've got my mold here with my wire coming through, and I'm just going to snip. I'll leave myself maybe an extra 6 inches on this side. Snip that, put that off to the side. Now, the next thing I'll do is take one of the washers, and I'm going to tie that washer to the wire itself. So I just send this around a couple times, making sure that it's secure. Tie it to itself tightly, because there's quite a bit of tension on this. The mold, the styrofoam center, is going to want to float when you fill this thing up with concrete. So you need a way to anchor this styrofoam center into the middle of the mold so it doesn't float. So once I've got that set, now I know that this won't pull through. You can see I can put quite a bit of tension on here so that when my styrofoam center is attached to this thing, it's not going to come off. The next part is to attach this wire to my eye bolt. So I will put that off to the side for a second, but I need to push the eye bolt through the styrofoam center. So what I'll do is try to find a sweet spot, and I'll just force this through, trying to make sure that it lines up and I'm not going through on an angle, so I want that to go straight through. And you'll see it pop out on the other side. So now I've got my styrofoam with the eye bolt through it. Pull that back out. And I'm going to take my big washer, feed that right over the top. And now you can see that big washer is going to catch all the pressure and spread the pressure out over the foam, because what I found was the eye bolt itself, there's enough pressure on this thing that the eye bolt, when you start to fill it, if you don't have that washer there, the eye bolt will actually start to pull through the styrofoam itself. So you need something to spread out the pressure and stop the eye bolt from pulling through. And then I'll take a small washer, big washer first to spread the pressure out, small washer, and then I'll thread my nut on. And I'll just do that loosely because I'm going to need to tether some more wire on the top there as well. So now that I've got this organized, I'm going to take my wire that's tethered on that side with the washer, and I'm going to pull this down. Now, this is actually the most important part. The styrofoam center that I'm using here is just a hair under 6 inches, and the mold itself is 14 inches. The inside diameter of the mold is 14 inches. 14 minus 6 leaves 8. That means that I've got 4 inches to play with on either side. So what I need to do laterally across the mold, I've got 4 inches, but I also have 4 inches top to bottom on the mold as well. So I need 4 inches of line plus the eye bolt itself. Now you've got to remember, you've got about 1.5 to 2 inches of just the actual eye of the bolt itself. So that means I'm going to need, I've got about 2 inches here, and then I'm going to need 2 inches of line, and that's going to equal 4 inches from the bottom of the mold up to the styrofoam center. Then the styrofoam center takes up 6 inches, and then from the top of the styrofoam center to the top of the mold should be an additional 4 inches. So this would be 4, 6, and 4, and that leaves me with 14 inches. And that's actually the most critical component of this thing, is to make sure that you have the styrofoam centered inside the mold, top to bottom and left to right. This way you don't have a thick spot of concrete on one side and a shallow spot on the other side. So I've got, I'm going to adjust the length of this line so that when it's all tied off to the eye bolt itself, it's approximately 4 inches total. And once I get this set, it doesn't have to be exact, but it needs to be very close, because otherwise the stone will have a wobble to it and you'll have an inherent weak spot. And that's something we really want to try to avoid. So all I'm doing is taking that wire and going around the eye bolt several times, and then I'm going to tie it off so that it won't move. So I'll tie the wire to itself, basically in a knot. And once we get it set up, I'll show you what it looks like once we have it all tied off. I'm just going through a bunch of times, make sure that trying to take up some of that long wire that I had. And what you'll see once I've got this all buttoned up, it's pretty easy to tell that it's sitting pretty dang close to the middle. So what you do, now I've got that mold set up from the top down. I've got my washer. You can see the washer is tied so that it won't pull through. The washer holds it in place. And I've got about 2 inches of line. I've got 2 inches in the eye bolt itself. And then the styrofoam is actually hanging. The equator of the styrofoam is in line with the equator of the mold. And that's exactly what we want to see. So now that's tied up. And you can see, again, it's right in the middle so that it's centered from left to right, centered from front to back, and from top to bottom, so that that styrofoam ball, when I fill this thing with concrete, the styrofoam will be dead center inside the mold itself. I'll just lay that to the side. The next piece is going to be to take more of this wire. And this was the part that, once I figured it out, it made it easy to guarantee that that styrofoam didn't shift around when you were filling it, because that was one of the problems we always faced. The styrofoam would move around quite a bit, and you'd have an inherent weak spot. So now what I'm doing, I've got the nut loosely on the end of the eye bolt itself, and I'm going to take that wire and I'm going to wrap it around underneath the nut against the washer, and I'm going to circle it around a few times and tie it off, and then I'll tighten the nut down so that it squeezes everything together. So the washers are compressed, the wire is compressed underneath the nut, and that wire now becomes really secure. So I'll take this and loop it around a few times. And then tighten the nut down, just finger tight, so that it stays in place. And now I know that I've got a tight end on that, and I've got my wire here. So that's attached to the end. And now as I'm filling it, I'll be able to grab this wire and adjust the styrofoam center, shake it from side to side so that all the concrete settles around it, and I can center this thing exactly where I want it. Now, the next piece would be, the next thing I would do if I was making this stone would be to take out my silicone spray and literally hose this thing down on the inside to make sure that it would release properly when I'm done. So I'm going to hose this thing down and soak it completely. Then I would do the same thing with this half. Soak it completely in silicone spray. You can't do too much of this. And then take the two halves, put these two halves together, and zip tie them. And for our purposes, we've got 12 spots on this thing that we can zip tie, but for our purposes, we'll just do a couple. Okay. And then I need to reach in and grab the end of that wire and pull it through. So now I have that wire that's attached to the end of the eye bolt itself. So now it is ready to go. You've got your releasing agent, the silicone spray is in there. I would put the zip ties all the way around, mix up my concrete, and just start to fill it, making sure that this wire stays out. I would make sure that wire stays out so that you have something to grab onto. So I would fill it, and what you'll notice is that as I'm shaking it and trying to settle the concrete down, the styrofoam ball is going to float to the top. It'll float as high as that cable will allow it to. And then as I get closer and closer to maybe the 3/4 mark, I'm going to start taking this wire and shaking it from side to side, front to back, and making sure that it's exactly centered inside the mold itself. And then as I get closer and closer to the top, I continue that process. Put a couple trowelfuls of concrete in, and then shake this from side to side. Shake the entire mold, vibrate everything down. And you can repeat that process until you are right at the very top and you can't get any more concrete in there. You can't vibrate it down anymore. You can't settle it. And then shake this from side to side one more time, making sure it's right in the right spot. And then the last little piece that you'll do is to snip this wire underneath the layer of concrete. So I just take needle nose and I get in there, snip, cut the wire, and now that's buried in the concrete forever. And then 24 hours later, cut the zip ties, take it out, let the stone cure for at least a week, and that's it. You've got a stone that's now been adjusted. This would be 115 pounds if it was solid concrete, and instead we've taken 6 inches of concrete out of the middle of the stone, and that should produce a stone that's about 10 pounds lighter. So easy process, and it allows you, depending on the size of the styrofoam, it allows you to really adjust the weights of the stones. So if you've got the jump between the 215 stone and the 255 stone is something that we've been struggling with. That's a massive leap up. So we've now made stones in tiny little graduations. We've got 229, 236, 244, and then 250. So we've got a couple different sizes, all with the same mold, but just playing around with the different size of the styrofoam. So simple process, and once we get this organized and we get a little bit of a chart built out, we'll be selling kits that will, if you wanted to make your stone 10 pounds less, you can just buy the kit so that you can use your mold to produce different stones. That's it. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, you can always email me, rob@hybridathletics.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram, CrossFit Rob O. You can send me messages directly there as well. But email is always good, rob@hybridathletics.com. If you have any questions about stone molds, please feel free to reach out. And I've got everything in stock. I can send everything to you. And if you've got questions about this process in particular, don't hesitate to reach out.